Let's talk about something we hear all the time, globalization. But what if I told you the story most of us know is, well, just the tip of the iceberg? We're going to dig into the real making of our global world. And trust me, it's a story that's way older than you think. All right, let's get into it. So let me just ask you this. When did our world really get so connected? Seriously, when you hear that word, globalization, what's the first image that pops into your head? I bet for a lot of us, it's something pretty modern, right? Kind of a thing of the last 50 years. You know, you picture giant container ships, the internet connecting everyone instantly, maybe big international brands you see everywhere. But what if all of that is just the latest chapter in a much, much older book? The real story here, the one about how we all got so interconnected, it's ancient. It's woven through thousands of years of trade, of people moving, and of ideas spreading across the globe. Okay, so here's the first big idea we need to wrap our heads around. Globalization is not new. Not even close. For literally thousands of years, our world has been way more connected than we usually give it credit for. We're talking travelers, traders, pilgrims, all of them constantly on the move, carrying goods, spreading ideas, and yep, even spreading diseases across huge distances. And when I say old, I mean really old. We're talking about active trade routes linking the Indus Valley with West Asia 5,000 years ago. Think about that. By the 7th century, we can even see evidence of germs traveling over these long-distance networks. And by the 9th century, sailing and trade were so important to people on India's west coast that they were carving ships right into their memorial stones. So no, this isn't some modern invention. It's a core part of the human story. And if you want the perfect example of this ancient connectivity, look no further than the legendary Silk Roads. Now, don't picture just one single road. It was this incredible, vibrant network of routes, crisscrossing land and sea, basically knitting together huge parts of the known world. The scale of this thing was just mind-blowing. These weren't little local paths. They linked Asia with Europe and North Africa. And they were around for a long time, starting even before the Christian era and going strong for almost 1,500 years. You can really think of them as the main arteries of the pre-modern world. But here's the crucial part to get. It was never just about the goods. Trade and culture, they always travel together. I mean, sure, it was called the Silk Road for a reason. Chinese silk was a huge deal, but so were pottery, textiles, and spices heading west. And going the other way, you had precious metals like gold and silver flowing from Europe to Asia. But that's not all. Ideas were on the move too. Buddhism, for instance, spread out from India along these exact same routes. And later on, Christian missionaries and Muslim preachers, yep, they traveled them too. All right, let's jump forward in time a bit to the 16th century. This is a game-changing moment. European sailors figure out sea routes to Asia, and, of course, they discover the Americas. Suddenly, everything accelerates. The world starts to feel a whole lot smaller, and that had consequences that were both amazing and, frankly, absolutely devastating. You know, you can actually see this huge global exchange in the food on your plate. Everything about spaghetti. Well, the idea is that noodles traveled west from China and eventually became spaghetti in Italy. But the food traffic went both ways. Think about potatoes, tomatoes, chilies, so many things we take for granted. None of them were known in Europe or Asia until about 500 years ago. They all came from the Americas. Take the humble potato. It completely changed Europe. Suddenly, poor people had a cheap, reliable food source. They could eat better, they lived longer. But this created a really dangerous dependency. And we all know what happened in Ireland. In the mid-1840s, a disease wiped out the potato crop. The result? The Great Famine. About 1 million people starved to death. 1 million! And twice that many had to leave the country. It's incredible. A single crop from a continent thousands of miles away held the power of life and death over an entire nation. But this great exchange, it had a much, much darker side. When the Europeans came to conquer the Americas, their most powerful weapon wasn't guns or steel. Not at all. It was something they carried with them, something completely invisible. It was germs. See, the Americas had been isolated from the rest of the world for millions of years, so the people living there had zero immunity to the diseases Europeans brought with them. Smallpox in particular was absolutely catastrophic. It wasn't just a disease, it was a weapon of conquest that wiped out entire communities, making it way easier for the Europeans to take over. And this quote here from John Winthrop, it's just chilling. He literally says that God cleared our title by killing the natives with smallpox. He saw it as a gift. So, in the wake of this conquest, a new global economy starts to take shape. And it's fueled by the incredible resources of the Americas, especially silver, pouring out of mines in places like Peru and Mexico. All this new wealth basically bankrolled Europe's trade with Asia. And bit by bit, the center of world trade started shifting west. Europe was becoming the new hub of the global economy. And we have to be really clear about this. This new global economy was built on a foundation of unimaginable brutality. Plantations sprang up in the Americas, growing crops like cotton and sugar, not for local use, but specifically for European markets. And who worked these plantations? Enslaved people, captured in Africa and forced across the ocean. This created that infamous triangular trade system, locking Europe, Africa, and the Americas together in a cycle of violence and exploitation. Okay, so let's shift gears again and jump to the 19th century, because this is where things start to look a lot more like the world we know today. Economists talk about three key types of movement, or flows, that really defined this era. And these three flows are basically the blueprint for the modern global economy. Now, these three flows, they sound academic, but they're simple and incredibly powerful. They are the bedrock of our world today. First, you've got the flow of trade. Goods moving around the planet. Think about the global supply chain for your phone. Second is the flow of labor, people migrating in search of work. Still a massive deal today, right? And third, the flow of capital, money being invested across borders. These aren't just things that happened a long time ago, they are the very forces shaping our lives right now. So let's see how they all connect. Here's a perfect example of how this works. Back in Britain, they had these things called the Corn Laws. Basically, they made it expensive to import grain to protect their own farmers. But then they got rid of them. What happened? Cheap food came flooding in from other countries. British farms just couldn't compete. Huge areas of land were just abandoned. And tens of thousands of farm workers lost their jobs. So what did they do? They had to move to the cities or even overseas to find work. See how that works? A change in one flow, trade, caused a huge domino effect in another flow, labor. It's a perfect illustration of how all these forces are tangled together. You pull one string and the whole web shakes. And the sheer scale of this movement is just hard to even comprehend. We're talking an estimated 150 million people leaving their homes in the 19th century, all over the world, crossing oceans, crossing continents, all looking for a better life. Our world was literally remade by people on the move. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? It's that our hyper-connected world isn't some new thing that just popped up in the last 50 years. No way. It's the end result of a long, complex, and often really brutal history. It's a story told through silk and spices, through potatoes and plagues, through silver, and through the lives of enslaved people. It's a story of connection, yeah, but also of conflict and of relentless change. And that really brings us to a final question for you to think about. We've seen how globalization has been pushed and pulled by everything from technology and politics to economics and even germs. So now that we know just how deep and complicated this history is, what do you think is going to shape the next chapter of this story?